Picture this. In exactly 14 seconds, a perfectly crafted smile is about to turn into a weapon. The Capitol chamber is dead silent. Cameras rolling, 40 million Americans watching. And Jasmine Crockett's fingers are hovering over a recording that could shatter everything the White House has built. What you're about to hear is a story of how one congresswoman brought down the most protected image in American politics. But this isn't just about politics. This is about children sleeping on concrete floors while someone in a white silk dress smiled for cameras. The truth was so explosive it couldn't stay buried. And when it finally came to light, it changed everything. But before we get to that moment that broke the internet and sent shockwaves to Washington, you need to understand how we got here. Because this story doesn't start in that hearing room. It starts months earlier, in the shadows of America's border detention centers, where children were disappearing from the headlines but never from the nightmares of those who saw them. The Capitol Hill hearing room doesn't breathe. It watches. Cameras glide like silent hawks, their black eyes waiting for a slip, a glance, a word that could ignite a storm. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. Their banners glow on the walls, feeding a nation that can already smell the tension in the air. The morning light cuts through the tall windows like golden blades, slicing across marble floors that have witnessed decades of political theater. But today feels different. Today, the very air seems charged with electricity, the kind that builds before a devastating storm. Jasmine Crockett steps through those chamber doors, her heels striking marble in a measured, unshaken rhythm. She's not scanning the room, but she feels every pair of eyes on her. The Republican stares carry a mixture of curiosity, contempt, and something else. Something that looks suspiciously like fear. She's carrying more than just a briefcase today. She's carrying the weight of every sleepless night she spent reviewing documents, every phone call from whistleblowers too scared to go public, every photograph that made her stomach turn. This isn't just another congressional hearing for her. This is a reckoning. Across that polished expanse sits Melania Trump in the witness chair, framed by perfect stage lighting that was adjusted 3 times before the cameras rolled. She's wearing a pristine white suit that drinks in the camera light, like it was engineered for this exact moment. And maybe it was. Her smile seems soft from afar, gentle even, but up close it gleams with the precision of a scalpel. Those pearl earrings catch the light with every calculated tilt of her head, flashing like signals meant for someone outside the room. Her posture is perfect, shoulders back, chin lifted just enough to project authority, without seeming arrogant. Every detail has been rehearsed, every angle planned. She looks like she stepped out of a magazine cover about grace under pressure. But Jasmine has learned to read the spaces between the perfection. The way Melania's left hand rests just slightly too rigid on the table. The micro pause before each smile. The way her eyes don't quite meet the cameras when she thinks no one is looking. These are the tells of someone who's built their entire life around performance. The moderator steps to the microphone, his voice smooth but touched with the kind of deference usually reserved for royalty. Today we welcome former First Lady Melania Trump, a tireless advocate for humanitarian issues, including the welfare of children at our borders. The applause from one side of the aisle is immediate and sustained, but Jasmine notices it's just a beat too enthusiastic, like it was coordinated. She's seen this before. The theater of politics designed to shape perception before a single substantive word is spoken. Jasmine's eyes don't move from her desk, but her grip tightens on the folder in her hands until its edges bend. Inside isn't just paper. It's months of investigation, dozens of interviews, and evidence so damning it kept her awake at night. It's a fuse waiting for a spark, and she's the only one in the room who knows how big the explosion will be. She thinks about the call she received 3 weeks ago. A trembling voice on the other end, someone who used to work at the detention facilities. Congresswoman, you need to know what really happened when the cameras weren't rolling. You need to know what they did to those children. That call led to another, then another, a network of former employees, volunteers, and even some current staff who couldn't stay silent anymore. Each conversation added another piece to a puzzle that painted a picture so horrific. Jasmine had to verify every detail twice before she could believe it. The first questions roll in, formal and predictable as a scripted play. The Republican members lob softballs about humanitarian efforts and charitable work. Melania answers with rehearsed ease. her voice carrying just the right amount of warmth and conviction. She speaks of compassion, of sleepless nights worrying about vulnerable children, of being a mother first and understanding the sacred bond between parent and child. The cameras drink it in, broadcasting every graceful nod, every perfectly timed pause, every carefully crafted tear that threatens to form but never quite falls. She's good at this. Maybe too good. She talks about visiting facilities, about holding children's hands, about the work her foundation has done to improve conditions. She mentions specific dollar amounts donated, specific programs implemented. The numbers sound impressive. The programs sound comprehensive. If you didn't know better, you'd think you were listening to Mother Teresa. But Jasmine does know better. She knows those visits lasted exactly long enough for a photo opportunity. She knows those dollar amounts went to administrative costs and overhead. She knows those programs existed mainly on paper and in press releases. As Melania speaks, painting herself as a guardian angel of America's border children, Jasmine feels the weight of the evidence in her folder growing heavier. Every compassionate word, every claim of advocacy, every tear-worthy story about protecting the innocent makes what's coming next even more devastating. Then, without warning, Melania's tone shifts. It's subtle at first, like a cloud passing over the sun. She straightens in her chair, and something behind her eyes hardens. She turns her head, locks her gaze directly on Jasmine Crockett, and that gentle smile transforms into something else entirely. "You know," she says, her voice taking on an edge sharp enough to cut glass, "I find it interesting that some people in this room seem more interested in political theater than actually helping children." The temperature in the room drops several degrees. Reporters lean forward in their seats. Camera operators instinctively zoom in, sensing that something significant is about to happen. Jasmine doesn't react. She simply continues looking at her notes. But every person in that room can feel the tension building like pressure in a boiler. Melania isn't finished. That smile, now cold as winter morning, spreads wider. "In fact, I would go so far as to say that you, Congresswoman Crockett, are unfit to speak on immigration and children's rights." Each word is clipped and deliberate, delivered with the precision of a surgeon making an incision. The sentence doesn't just land in the room. It detonates. The insult isn't just personal. It's professionally devastating, designed to stick, to be replayed in sound bites for days, to undermine everything Jasmine has worked for. The chamber goes silent for what feels like an eternity, but is probably only 3 seconds. It's the kind of silence that comes before something breaks. You can almost hear the collective intake of breath from 40 million viewers. But here's what Melania doesn't know. She's just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because Jasmine Crockett didn't come here to trade insults or play political games. She came here to detonate the truth in front of the entire nation, and Melania just handed her the perfect detonator. Jasmine doesn't flinch, doesn't look up, doesn't give Melania the satisfaction of a reaction. She sits back slightly, her fingers still resting on that folder, and for the first time since entering the chamber, she allows herself the faintest hint of a smile. Her eyes don't narrow, don't dart away, don't show even a flicker of the anger that insult was designed to provoke. They just hold, calm and steady as a sniper's aim, on Melania's face. But behind that calm, something dangerous has stirred, something that's been building for months, fed by every sleepless night, every haunting photograph, every child story that was buried in bureaucracy. The press section is going crazy. Pens scratch frantically across notepads. Phone cameras capture every micro-expression. Producers in control rooms across the country are already cutting clips, knowing they've just witnessed television gold. But Jasmine isn't paying attention to any of that. She reaches forward with deliberate calm and flips open her laptop. The hinge creaks just enough for the microphone to catch it, and that small sound somehow carries more menace than any shout could have. A pale blue glow lights her face, cutting sharp against the marble shadows of the room. Her right hand slides across the trackpad, steady and deliberate, as a bomb disposal expert working on a live device. The cursor moves across the screen, past folders labeled testimonies and financial records and internal communications. Then it stops, hovering over a single file buried deep in a folder marked audio evidence. The title is plain, almost forgettable. Tape_2019_June_internal. But in that bland, bureaucratic label lives something so explosive it could turn this polished congressional hearing into a televised detonation that reshapes American politics forever. The room seems to lean forward collectively, though no one has moved. There's something in Jasmine's posture, in the way she's positioned her hands, that suggests she's holding a loaded weapon. And in many ways, she lets the moment stretch, savoring the weight of what's about to happen. Melania's insult is still hanging in the air like smoke from a fired shot, but Jasmine is about to return fire with a nuclear weapon. Finally, she leans forward, her voice smooth as silk, but edged with steel sharp enough to cut diamonds. Mrs. Trump, thank you for that assessment of my qualifications. Before we continue, I'd like to ask you about your own experience with these issues. Could you walk us through the exact ways your border charity funds have been used over the past 3 years? The question sounds innocent enough, professional, the kind of thing you'd expect in a congressional hearing. But there's something underneath it, a current of electricity that makes everyone in the room sit up straighter. Melania's media training kicks in automatically. She launches into a practiced answer that sounds like it was written by a team of public relations experts and focus group to death. She speaks of compassion, of personal visits to facilities, of being a mother first, and understanding the profound responsibility that comes with protecting children. Her voice carries just the right amount of emotion, just the right balance of strength and vulnerability. She talks about sleepless nights spent worrying about kids she's never met, about the weight of knowing that her actions could mean the difference between safety and danger for thousands of vulnerable children. She mentions specific programs, rattles off impressive-sounding dollar amounts, describes meetings with facility directors and coordination with international aid organizations. Her smile softens in all the right places. Her voice catches with emotion at precisely the right moments. The cameras frame her perfectly, capturing every angle that reinforces the image of the compassionate First Lady America thought they knew. But to Jasmine, every word is nothing more than lacquer painted over rotting wood. She's seen the real financial records. She knows where those donations actually went. She's talked to the people who were in those facilities when Melania's motorcade arrived and left 15 minutes later. When Melania finishes her answer, clearly pleased with the performance, Jasmine tilts her head slightly. It's a gesture that might look curious or interested to casual observers. But anyone who knows Jasmine recognizes it as the moment a predator locks onto its prey. That's very touching, she says, her tone so genuinely warm it could have come from a conversation between old friends. It's clear you care deeply about these children. For a moment, Melania looks almost pleased. Maybe she thinks she's navigating this successfully. Maybe she believes her performance was convincing enough to deflect whatever Jasmine had planned. Then, without warning, everything changes. Jasmine's voice drops just half a note, barely perceptible to most listeners, but enough to make the air in the room tighten like a wire about to snap. So I'm sure you'll have no trouble explaining the context around your private conversation with Department of Homeland Security officials in June 2019. The question doesn't just land in the room. It crashes into it like a meteor, sending shockwaves through every row of seats. The date is specific. The reference to DHS officials is precise. This isn't a fishing expedition. This is a targeted strike. For the first time since entering the chamber, Melania's composure cracks just slightly. It's barely visible, just a micro-expression that flickers across her face for a tenth of a second. But the cameras catch it, and more importantly, Jasmine sees it. Melania's eyes flicker toward that laptop sitting in front of Jasmine, then back to committee, then to the press gallery, as if searching for a lifeline that doesn't exist. Her tongue darts across her lower lip, a tiny gesture that betrays the fact that her mouth has suddenly gone dry. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," she says, but her voice lacks the confidence it carried just moments before. "I've had many conversations with government officials over the years. It's a deflection, but it's weak, and everyone in the room can feel it." Jasmine doesn't blink, doesn't rush to fill the silence. She just sits there, letting Melania's non-answer hang in the air like a confession. Then, with the kind of certainty that makes even the most powerful people start to sweat, she reaches for her laptop, "Let me refresh your memory," she says softly. Her fingers move across the trackpad with surgical precision. One click, then another. The speakers around the chamber crackle to life with a burst of static that somehow sounds ominous, like thunder rolling in from a distant storm. And then it happens. The moment that changes everything. The voice that fills the chamber is unmistakably Melania's. Not the carefully modulated tone she uses for public appearances. Not the warm, compassionate voice she's been using today. This is different. This is Melania when she thinks no one is listening. Melania when the mask is off. Melania when she's telling the truth. Who cares about the children? For words. For simple words that hang in the air like poison gas, seeping into every corner of the chamber, choking the breath out of 40 million viewers. The words are cold, dismissive, delivered with the casual cruelty of someone discussing the weather. But it's what comes next that makes the recording truly devastating. There's a pause, then a sound that makes blood freeze in veins across America. Melania laughs, not a nervous chuckle or an uncomfortable giggle. A genuine, amused laugh, as if the suffering of children is some kind of private joke. The reaction in the chamber is instant and visceral. A collective gasp sweeps through the gallery, sharp and shocked as if everyone in the room has been physically struck. Some people actually recoil in their seats. One woman in the press section covers her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with horror. Pens stop moving across notepads. Phones freeze mid-text. Even the camera operators seem stunned, though their training keeps the lenses rolling. This is the kind of moment that careers are built on, the kind of footage that gets replayed for decades. The recording continues, capturing more of the conversation. Melania's voice discussing logistics, talking about photo opportunities, referring to detention centers as sets and children as props for the cameras. Each word is another nail in the coffin of her carefully constructed public image. But it's that laugh that everyone will remember, that casual, dismissive laugh that reveals more about her character than 1,000 speeches ever could. The cameras pivot to capture Melania's reaction, and what they find is a masterclass in watching someone's world collapse in real time. That perfect composure, maintained through years of public scrutiny, begins to crack like ice under pressure. Her lips tremble so slightly that only the high-definition cameras catch it. The color drains from her face despite her carefully applied makeup. Her hands, which have been resting casually on the table, now grip the edge so tightly that her knuckles turn white. For the first time in her public life, Melania Trump looks genuinely afraid. The recording plays for another 30 seconds, each word more damning than the last. When it finally ends, the silence that follows is deafening. It's the kind of silence that comes after an explosion, when everyone is still processing what just happened. Jasmine doesn't speak immediately. She's learned the power of silence, the way it can make people squirm, the way it can amplify the impact of what just occurred. She lets the moment stretch, forcing the room and the millions watching at home to sit with what they just heard. When she finally speaks, her voice is calm, almost conversational. "Mrs. Trump, would you like to provide some context for what we just heard?" It's a lifeline, though a thin one, an opportunity for Melania to explain, to contextualize, to somehow mitigate the damage. But they both know there's no explanation that can erase what 40 million people just heard. Melania clears her throat, a sound that gets picked up by every microphone in the room and broadcast across the nation. She leans toward her microphone, trying to summon the poise that has served her so well throughout her public life. "That recording," she begins, and her voice wavers just slightly before she regains control. "That recording was taken out of context. It was a private conversation about policy challenges, and my words were taken out of context." The response is exactly what everyone expected, but it lands with all the impact of a wet paper towel. The phrase "out of context" might work for a misunderstood quote in a newspaper article, but it's harder to sell when people have heard the actual audio of you laughing about children suffering. Jasmine leans forward slightly, just enough to signal that she's not finished. When she speaks, her voice carries a quiet authority of someone who holds all the cards. "With all due respect, Mrs. Trump, context doesn't change the words 'who cares about the children?'" Context doesn't change your laughter when discussing facilities where children sleep on concrete floors. The sentence lands like a gavel strike, final and devastating. But wait, because what happens next is where the story goes from shocking to absolutely explosive. That recording Jasmine just played? It was just the beginning. She's been building this case for months, and she's got enough evidence to bury Melania so deep she'll never see daylight again. As the hearing takes a brief recess, Jasmine's phone buzzes with a text message from a number she recognizes. It's from Marcus, a former DHS staffer, who reached out to her months ago. The message is short but loaded with implications. There's more. Several tapes. Schedule says she visited 3 facilities that day. You need to hear what she said at the other 2. During the recess, reporters swarm the hallway like sharks sensing blood in the water. But Jasmine doesn't stop to give statements or answer questions. She has work to do. In a quiet corner office, she takes another call that changes everything. The voice on the other end is soft, trembling, carrying the weight of someone who's been holding on to a terrible truth for too long. Congresswoman, my name is Sarah, and I used to work at the Border Detention Center in McAllen. I saw what happened when she visited, and I can't stay quiet anymore. Sarah's story unfolds slowly, each detail more heartbreaking than the last. She describes children shivering under thin foil blankets that provided no warmth, their small bodies curled up on concrete floors so cold that some kids got sick from sleeping on them. She talks about trays of food that arrived already spoiled, milk that had gone sour, fruit moldy with brown spots that made children gag when they tried to eat it. The kids ate what they could, Sarah says, her voice breaking. Not because it was good, but because they were so hungry and it was all they had. But it's what Sarah tells her about Melania's visit that makes Jasmine set her pen down and close her eyes. She showed up with a whole media circus. Cameras, reporters, her press secretary, even a photographer from Vogue. The facility had been scrubbed clean for 3 days before she arrived. They moved all the sickest children to a different wing, so she wouldn't see them. They brought in new blankets just for the photo op, then took them away after she left. Sarah describes how Melania posed for pictures with 2 carefully selected children, both recently cleaned and dressed in new clothes that would be taken away as soon as the cameras stopped rolling. How she nodded and smiled as a facility director fed her rehearsed talking points about their comprehensive care programs and child-centered approaches. The whole thing lasted exactly 14 minutes, Sarah continues. I know because I was watching the clock, wondering if any of this was real. She touched exactly 2 children's hands, said maybe 50 words total, and then she was gone. The motorcade was pulling away before most of the kids even knew she'd been there. But here's the part that makes Jasmine's blood run cold. After Melania left, after the cameras were packed away and the new blankets were taken back to storage, Sarah went to check on the children in the main dormitory. They kept asking me who the lady in the pretty dress was. Sarah says, crying now. They wanted to know if she was there to help them, if she was going to take them to their parents. And I didn't know what to tell them, because I knew she wasn't coming back. When Sarah agrees to testify publicly, to put her name and face to this story, Jasmine knows she has something more powerful than just audio recordings. She has an eyewitness who's willing to risk everything to tell the truth. But Sarah doesn't just bring her story. She brings proof. The next morning, in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the Capitol, Sarah slides a warm manila envelope across the table to Jasmine. Her hand is shaking slightly, but her voice is steady. I took these that day, she says quietly. I knew someone needed to document what really happened. Jasmine opens the envelope, and the first photograph literally takes her breath away. It shows Melania outside the detention center, immaculate in a white designer dress that probably cost more than most people make in a month. She's smiling radiant in the Texas sunshine, with carefully maintained flowers blooming in the background and freshly swept pavement beneath her feet. The image is perfect magazine quality, the kind of photo that gets used in campaigns and history books. It's the image of compassion, of a first lady who cares deeply about the most vulnerable children in America. Jasmine slides the photo aside, and the next image hits her like a physical blow. It's the same facility, taken the same day, just minutes after Melania's motorcade disappeared down the highway. But this photo shows the reality she left behind. Children lying directly on concrete floors, so cold you can see their breath in the air. Some are wrapped in those thin foil blankets that look more like discarded fast food packaging than bedding. Others sit against bare walls, knees drawn up to their chests, eyes hollow and empty from weeks of confinement. The contrast between the two images is so stark, so brutal, that it almost looks staged. But it's not. It's just the difference between performance and reality, between what people are meant to see and what actually exists. These were taken exactly 17 minutes apart, Sarah explains, her voice barely above a whisper. The first one when her press event was ending, the second one after they moved the children back to their regular sleeping area. Jasmine sits back in her chair, letting the weight of what everyone just heard settle over the room. When she finally speaks, her voice carries a quiet authority of someone who has just delivered a knockout punch. Mrs. Trump, you came here today and called me unfit to speak about children's rights. After hearing your own words, your own voice discussing these vulnerable children in purely political terms, I have to ask, who exactly is unfit here? The question hangs in the air like smoke after an explosion. Melania stares back at her, lips pressed into a tight line, but she doesn't answer. Maybe she can't answer. Maybe she finally realizes that every word she says is just digging her hole deeper. But Jasmine still isn't done, because the story doesn't end with audio recordings and photographs. It ends with the consequences, with what happens when the truth finally breaks free and can't be contained anymore. The video clips from the hearing go viral before Melania even leaves the building. Within an hour, the phrase, "Who cares about the children?" is trending on every social media platform in existence. Within 6 hours, it's been translated into dozens of languages and shared millions of times around the world. The contrast photos, the side-by-side images of Melania's photo op and the reality concealed, become some of the most shared images in internet history. They appear on T-shirts and protest signs, in art installations and documentary films. They become a symbol, a visual representation of everything wrong with politics that prioritizes image over substance. But the real impact isn't measured in likes and shares. It's measured in the phone calls that start flooding congressional offices, in the protests that spring up in cities across the country, in the parents who look at their own children and decide they can't stay silent anymore. The collapse of Melania's public image doesn't happen all at once. It unravels slowly, thread by thread, as the full implications of the revelation sink in. First, it's the corporate sponsors. Brands that have been eager to associate themselves with her image start quietly distancing themselves. A jewelry line that was supposed to launch collaboration with her suddenly postpones indefinitely. A luxury hotel chain removes her photos from their website overnight. A skincare company cancels a planned campaign featuring her without any explanation. The fashion world, which had embraced her as a style icon, turns cold with stunning speed. Invitations to galas and runway shows simply stop arriving. Her name disappears from front-row seating charts at Fashion Week. Stylists who once competed for the privilege of dressing her now screen her calls. The carefully crafted aura of elegance and exclusivity that took years to build begins fraying visibly, and every loose thread seems to unravel 10 more. Then comes a moment that makes it clear even to her most loyal supporters that this isn't just a temporary scandal that will blow over. Her husband, Donald Trump, appears on a primetime news show for what was supposed to be a softball interview about his policy agenda. When the host inevitably brings up the border facility scandal and asks for his thoughts on his wife's comments, Trump's reaction tells everyone everything they need to know. He doesn't defend her. He doesn't attack her critics. He doesn't even mention her name. "We're here to talk about the future of America," he says curtly, his usual bluster nowhere to be found. The administration is focused on moving forward, on solutions, not on relitigating past conversations. It's a politician's non-answer, but the subtext is clear as crystal. Melania is now a liability, even her own husband. The woman who once stood by his side through every scandal, every controversy, every crisis, is now too toxic for him to defend. The clip of Trump essentially abandoning his wife goes viral within minutes. Social media explodes with commentary about loyalty, about marriage, about what it means when even your spouse won't stand up for you. The hashtag Even who won't touch it starts trending and the memes write themselves. Behind the scenes, the political world begins whispering. Former allies speak to reporters off the record, sharing anecdotes about Melania's obsession with image, her insistence that every public appearance be carefully choreographed, her apparent indifference to anything that didn't directly benefit her brand. Stories leak about her demanding multiple takes for supposedly candid moments, about her requiring approval of all photographs before they could be released, about her walking out of events when the lighting wasn't perfect. Individually, these stories might have seemed like harmless vanity. Together, they paint a picture of someone who saw public service as nothing more than an extended photo shoot. Online, the shift is brutal and immediate. Fan accounts that had spent years promoting her style and elegance either go dark or pivot to other subjects entirely. Tribute websites get taken down. Years of carefully curated content celebrating her fashion choices and public appearances simply vanishes from the internet. But it's the organic response from regular people that really drives the point home. Old clips of her be Best Campaign, originally designed to combat cyberbullying and help children, get resurfaced and edited with the audio of her saying, "Who cares about the..." There are more photos. Children eating off paper plates. The food clearly spoiled. A bathroom with broken fixtures and no soap. A medical facility. That's little more than a closet with a folding chair and a first aid kit. That looks like it came from a gas station. But it's the final photograph that breaks Jasmine's heart completely. It shows a little girl, maybe 6 years old, standing by a window that's too high for her to see out of. She's wearing the same clothes she's probably worn for weeks, and she's holding what looks like a drawing. When Jasmine looks closer, she realizes it's a crayon picture of a woman and a child holding hands. "That's Maria," Sarah explains. "She drew that picture of her mom the day after the First Lady's visit. She kept asking if the pretty lady was going to bring her mom to see her. I never had the heart to tell her no." By the time the hearing reconvenes, Jasmine has made a decision. She's not going to hold anything back. The American people deserve to see all of it, to understand the full scope of what was hidden behind those photo opportunities and press releases. When the session resumes, the atmosphere in the chamber is electric. Word has leaked that something big is coming, and additional reporters have crowded into every available space. The gallery is packed beyond capacity, with people standing in the aisles and press against the walls. Melania enters looking less composed than before. She's changed into a darker suit, perhaps hoping to project more seriousness, but nothing can hide the tension in her movements or the way her eyes dart nervously around the room. Jasmine doesn't waste time with pleasantries. As soon as she's recognized, she launches into her next line of questioning. "Mrs. Trump, you mentioned visiting border facilities as part of your humanitarian work. I'd like to focus on one specific visit, to the McAllen facility in June 2019. She pauses, letting the specificity of the date and location sink in. This isn't a general question. This is surgical precision. According to the official record, you spent 14 minutes at that facility. Can you walk us through exactly what you observed during those 14 minutes? Melania shifts in her chair, trying to buy time. "I've visited many facilities during my time as First Lady. It's difficult to recall the specific details of every visit. It's a dodge, but Jasmine expected it. Let me help refresh your memory," she says, and nods toward the technical booth. "I'd like the committee to see some photographs that were taken that day." The large screens around the chamber flicker to life, and suddenly everyone in the room is looking at that first image. Melania in her pristine white dress, smiling in the sunshine, looking every inch the compassionate advocate. There's a murmur of appreciation from some quarters of the room. Even knowing what's coming, it's hard not to be struck by how perfect the image is, how completely it captures the narrative Melania has built around herself. This photograph was taken at 2:47 p.m. on June 15th, 2019. Jasmine states for the record, "Do you remember this moment, Mrs. Trump?" Melania nods, looking relieved. Maybe she thinks this is going to be a friendly line of questioning after all. "Yes, I remember visiting that facility. It was a meaningful experience, an opportunity to see firsthand the important work being done to care for these vulnerable children." "I'm sure it was meaningful," Jasmine replies, her tone neutral. "Now I'd like the committee to see another photograph. taken at the same facility 17 minutes later. The screen changes, and the collective intake of breath from the gallery is audible. The image of children on concrete floors fills every screen in the chamber, and the contrast with the previous photo is immediately, devastatingly clear. The silence that follows is profound. You can hear the hum of the air conditioning, the faint rustle of papers, the barely perceptible whir of camera motors. But no one speaks, because what is there to say? Finally, Jasmine breaks the silence. Mrs. Trump, this photograph shows the same facility, the same children, just minutes after your visit ended. Can you explain this discrepancy? For the first time since the hearing began, Melania seems genuinely at a loss for words. Her mouth opens and closes without sound. Her carefully maintained composure is cracking in real time, and 40 million people are watching it happen. The conditions I observed were... She starts, then stops, apparently realizing that any description she gives will be contradicted by the photographic evidence. Jasmine doesn't let her off the hook. Mrs. Trump, were you aware that the children were moved to a different area during your visit? Were you told that the facility had been specially prepared for your cameras? The questions come like bullets, precise and devastating. Melania tries to deflect, to claim ignorance, but each answer only makes her look more complicit or more willfully blind. But Jasmine isn't finished. Not even close. I'd like to play another recording for committee, she announces, and the tension in the room somehow ratchets up another notch. This audio is from later the same day, captured by a cell phone when Melania thought she was speaking privately to her chief of staff. The quality isn't as clean as the first recording, but every word is clearly audible. The whole thing was perfectly staged. Melania's voice says through the speakers, "They showed me exactly what I needed to see. The press got their photos, we got our headlines, and everyone's happy." There's a pause, then her chief of staff's voice asking about the actual conditions in the facility. Melania's response is chilling in its casualness. "I don't need to know the details. Plausible deniability, remember? As long as we can say we're addressing the issue, that's all that matters politically." The recording continues for another minute, with Melania discussing the visit in purely political terms, analyzing the media coverage and planning follow-up events. At no point does she express any actual concern for the children she supposedly came to help. When the audio finally ends, the chamber is silent except for the sound of one reporter frantically typing, try to capture every word for the breaking news alert that's about to go out to millions of phones.